Today we're going to do camera comparison between the Pixel 8 Pro versus the Pixel 9 Pro XL. So let's talk about the front-facing camera, since I think this is one of the biggest changes from the previous model. So with the new front-facing camera, you can obviously tell that it's much wider, therefore you're going to get a much more easier experience adding another person taking a group selfie. And you do look farther away, whereas on the Pixel 8 Pro, it's so zoomed in, I don't really like it when it's just too much of my face. The other improvement is the skin tone. I really like how it's just much more warmer and the skin tone really pops out, versus on the Pixel 8 Pro, it seems like it's pretty dull. It doesn't have that much saturation and everything seems to be like very grayish. So if you find yourself using the front facing camera a lot when you're taking selfies or even vlogging, which I'll show you in the video section, this is going to be a great improvement or a great upgrade if you got the last model. Now for portrait mode, you still get 1.5 and 2x options, and everything looks pretty similar in terms of the focal length, the background blur and everything, but I will say the Pixel 9 Pro have some struggling with the side of my glasses or just glasses in general. Sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't. But I'm pretty sure that throughout the year, we're going to get some camera improvements along with these firmware updates. So it's not something that I would consider as a big concern, especially when the Pixel 9 just came out. Another difference I noticed is the color of the skin tone. Sometimes it's pretty noticeable, sometimes it's very slight, but I do see that the Pixel 9 Pro tends to lean more on the warmish side. Now for food pictures, I am leaning towards the Pixel 9 Pro just because it's just slightly more saturated, where the greens, the browns, the oranges just make it pop so ever slightly where it just captures my attention. If you're going to look at them separately, they're going to look very similar, but once they're side by side, the Pixel 9 Pro just stands out more. And from the last comparison with the Samsung Galaxy S24, that phone just makes a lot of food very saturated. It does pop and it makes the food really stand out. But on the Pixel 9 Pro, it really tones it down a lot where it doesn't look too unnatural. Now with the back cameras, you get an ultra-wide wide at 5x, but on the Pixel 9 Pro, you get the new ultra-wide lens. And in general, they all look very similar throughout the daytime. I don't see anything that stands out. And I'm sure the software side of things does most of the work, but I don't really see much of a difference unless you really zoom into specific areas or unless they're really comparing them intensely. And I think with the ultra wide, that's where you see the biggest difference, but everything else does look pretty much identical. For low light, this is where you will see more of a bigger difference between the two cameras, but again, most of it is pretty identical. You may see some differences where a certain area is brighter or it has a better exposure, or even the colors are slightly different. I do want to point out that when I'm taking pictures, especially video, there is a much more smoother experience with the camera on the Pixel 9 Pro with the new processor. So that would be my second point, where that's where you feel the biggest upgrade between these two phones. Now moving on to video with the front facing camera, this is where you see a much wider field of view and it feels like I'm less in your face, which is something I prefer. And then there's the color, where my skin tone is definitely much more saturated. If you look at my lips, it doesn't look too dark. And then switching to nighttime, you'll see another big difference where it's less micro jitters every time you hit that hard step. Even though the video is of course not the best, it's still a lot better than the Pixel 8 Pro. Now moving on to the ultra wide angle, it looks pretty much exactly the same. I can't tell anything or any differences apart. If anything, it's just the skin tone might be a little bit different. When shooting indoors, everything looks fairly similar. The biggest difference is if you look at the top part of the ceiling, definitely is a lot cleaner on the Pixel 9 Pro. And then moving outdoors where it's nighttime, you can tell that it's much cleaner on the 9 Pro. You can see a lot less noise, a lot less artifacts. So this is where you will see the biggest difference or the biggest improvement when you're shooting in this type of environment. And then moving on to the wide angle lens during daytime, and again, everything seems very similar, which they are pretty much the same lens, so I wouldn't really expect to see a huge difference. And then moving indoors, the skin tone is a bit different, where I would say it's just much more contrastier and the skin tones just pop out more on the Pixel 9 Pro. And then moving on to nighttime, everything seems fairly similar again, so really no big surprise here. And then for 5x, still pretty much the same. I would say like the stabilization might be a little bit different, where if my hand shakes, I feel like the Pixel 9 Pro does a better job making it look still, but it gets a bit softer, where on a Pixel 8 Pro, you can kind of see the jitterness. So that might be just a slight improvement, but again, no really big difference. Now, I haven't really taken any macro shots since I don't do it on a daily or ever, but you could do that on a Pixel 9 Pro easily now because you can do it with the ultra wide angle lens. and that's my third point of the biggest improvement between these two phones. Unless you really like the smaller form factor this year, which I do prefer smaller phones, that can be another extra upgrade. So yeah, that is the comparison between the Pixel 8 Pro versus the Pixel 9 Pro. Let me know your thoughts if you're gonna upgrade or not. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.